Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond Recovery. My name is Matt, and I have a special guest in the house today. Well, not in the house. I shouldn't lie like that. Over Zoom. And he's a fellow podcaster. His name is Jason LaChance, host of numerous podcasts, but the one that we're going to be talking about specifically today, I was a guest on, and it was Knockin Doorz Down. Doors with a Z. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm good, my brother. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Yeah, man. I very much enjoyed coming on your show. Very apparent your previous career and experience in radio broadcasting. You can just hear in your voice, the mic, the presentation, and next level. And that's why I want to start with your podcast. I really want to give it a shout out. And you know what really stood out to me, and it's been inspiring for me as you know a fellow podcaster. The social media game is just amazing. You guys do a great job, and I assume it's you. I imagine it's you, but you're very persistent without it being like overdone, because you break it up into chunks. For example, my episode, there's teasers, there's graphics, and wonderful graphics. You know, that blue, from what I gather, is very eye-catching. I googled, apparently blue is very eye-catching on Instagram and so forth. So you got that going on. And dude, like, just you have next level stuff. So for me, just for what it's worth, very inspiring what you're doing with that show. Beyond the graphics too. I mean, that's just that's the surface level stuff. But the actual show, man, is there is so many different recovery podcasts out there, but you guys are definitely just that cut above. So I honored, privileged to be a guest on it, and same thing for having you on the show today. So thanks, brother.
Oh, thank you, man. That's you know what? It's like I say, and maybe this happens in your recovery group, or someone goes, "Oh man, what they said really inspired me," and you go tell them, and the response is, "Oh, they know that." No, they don't, unless you tell them. So thank you. That really I means more than you know. Yeah, I mean, it's just me now. I can't take credit for the graphics. A friend of mine, Jason Van Dusen, who does those, so he's that. But yeah, all the social media, I produce all the content, the video, audio, everything. And for me, you know what I want to get across? Of course, I want people to go listen, because like your story, everybody's story that I've been able to speak with has so much value to bring, that there's one little nugget. But if someone's just simply going through social media, I don't want to be like, you have to go, but it's like, hey, here's a nugget of wisdom this person dropped, and hopefully you get a lot out of it. And maybe it's something that'll stick with you. Maybe you come back and visit the page again to kind of go, what was it exactly they said? So my aim is always just give them some value, and hopefully they're, I don't know about you. I'm kind of Walt Whitman, always be curious, never judgmental. So It's like, okay, what was that about? And I'll dig through pages and find people. That's how I found you. It was, like, oh, what's this dude's doing some awesome stuff. Let's see what he's about. And so I hope that just occurs for people, that if it's the scroll and they get some value out of it, great. If it takes them to the podcast and they listen to that episode, awesome. If they go back and listen to more, even better, because there's so many people that have such wisdom to offer through their life experiences. And that's just my goal. Is like, hey, let's give this stuff away free, right?
Yeah, no, I love it, man. It's such a good job. So kudos to you for that. You're totally right, though. Yeah, you're like, just as far as everybody's got some different nuggets to drop. As far as some value bombs, if you will, to bring people back. So what I like about it too is like, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and just doing a little bit of like reading about it and so forth. As far as my presentation, I've always been like, oh, I don't want to overexpose myself and all that. But there was actually a podcast that I listened to not too long ago that mentioned like everybody is doing that right now. Everybody's sort of quoted what used to be considered overexposure pre-COVID era is the norm now. So if you want to get in people's faces and get people remembering you in your podcast, that's what you got to do, is consistency. Yep. And and not just doing the same piece of content. So that's what when I say inspiring, to be specific, that's what it is. It's like you're out there. I think you've tagged me a few different times, and I'm just like, I wasn't used to that, because it would just be one and done, right? And just like, then you kind of like, it's hopes that reaches the right people. Right. But you got to keep it going, man. And so that's great stuff, great work there. So, and that's a little, a little advice, for me, and I assume for you as well, as far as like getting your stuff out there.
Absolutely. I had a gentleman on, Javelin, I recommend you reach out to him too. Really inspiring guy, recovery, but a motivator. And I pressed him on that. These people were giving me their time. Some of these people make like $100 an hour. I know it's what you do. So I asked the questions that I want to know. Like, okay, I'm going to get the insight from this person, even if it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And I asked him about that with ego. I have a real tough time. I know when I was a drinker, I didn't think I was God, but I certainly played at one. And my ego would get big. When I was sober, it was very deflated and humble. So, or not even humble, it was the opposite of self-esteem. It was just non-existent, not negative, not positive. It just wasn't there.
Right.
So I was asking, because I really have a concern about ego taking over. I fully believe in one of those AA sayings, ego edging God out.
Yep.
And that's not what I want. But he goes, look, you're a public figure, but you're doing it as of service. So, get it out there. Don't hesitate to put your face out there. Get out there and speak more. You have, some wisdom just like anybody else does in sharing, your knowledge, your story, whatever it is that people can relate to. So, he was really instrumental in me being like, okay, if I got some things to say, put it out there. If people find value in it, cool. If they don't, okay, people might have something negative to say, but that's their perspective. As long as you're coming from a good place and trying to be of service, then, go for it.
I love that. Another, I want to speak to, there's a couple of guests I want to mention that you've had on your show for Knockin Doorz Down. So Dr. Rob, and I just had him on the show as well. And I know that you had him on as well, and we had it sort of a mutual, like, oh yeah, he's like amazing, right? And same thing with him. He's constantly putting out content and it stays in my head. He stays in my periphery, stays not even periphery, like front and center,
Yeah.
And it's always worthwhile. So you know what? I love that. And like you say, it's all about your intent, right? If it's not an ego-driven intent of you putting your own face out there and just self-aggrandizing yourself, it's from a place of service, like you say, then yeah, absolutely. And then to your point, if it doesn't resonate with people, well, you know what? They just kind of go like this. They keep scrolling, it's all good, right? So, dude, yeah, I love it. I just wanted to start off with that. Secondly, I just noticed yesterday that you guys had Charlie Sheen on the show, right? Is this?
Twice.
Twice. So nice. You had him twice. Dude, that is amazing. I'm a fan of Charlie Sheen, just child of the 90s, you know what I mean? And Platoon and everything else that he did. How was that as far as like, how did that come to be? Like, as far as, getting him on the show, and then how was he, off camera, so to speak, versus on camera? Just a little bit about Charlie Sheen, if you don't mind.
It was one of those serendipitous kind of connection through connection situations. And we kind of, and I don't mean this in a negative way, had some assets to kind of leverage to make it happen. So it's kind of, help this person out, this person's help, so
totally.
But he comes walking in the first time we spoke to him. Actually, another great guy, recovery, Darren Prince, opioid addict, now has his own foundation, gives scholarships to help people with recovery. I think he's just published his second book, but he Hollywood agent, primarily sports, and like collector shows and stuff like that. So he's worked with different people. And Charlie had just become one of his clients. So he comes walking into his, I guess it would be a condo there on Sunset, if I remember, in LA. We went down to LA for it. Charlie didn't want to travel, which no worries, we'll come to you.
Sure.
And just come walking in. He's just nice. He's got, hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you. And just, you wouldn't think, because you have this picture in your head. Okay, Charlie Sheen, we've seen it. We've seen not only the movies. I'm like you, a huge fan, Major League, like literally I was a pitcher and my nickname was Wild Thing. And I got to tell him that. And he's like, how fucking cool is that?
That's rad. Yeah.
I got him before, when you could still get one, a Cleveland Indians hat. So he signed it, hey, Jason, give him the the heater Wild Thing, Charlie Sheen.
No way. That's amazing. Yeah.
So cool. But really a humble guy. Was a total blast to talk to. if beyond intelligent. You could just tell he's one of those people that I was going like, how did this guy in addiction, especially 2.5 Men was more alcohol at that time, retain and do so well on these shows. And he's just got this mind that you can tell retains things, because he was a very learned man. I mean, history and poetry and everything you could sit and talk about, and it was just like a total blast, and a good wisdom there too, because it was interesting. He's like, the first episode, if I quote it correctly, he goes, so, going to a group meeting, and, you're the famous atheist guy, what the fuck? So it was interesting to pick his brain from that, of like, how did you deal with a higher power type of thing? Because some of us do have that struggle coming to it. Mine was, I believed there was something, but I didn't think it would love me. And so it was interesting to hear someone where it's like, I didn't believe in anything. I just think you're born and then you live and then you're gone. Yeah. So it, you sit and you kind of hear from him and just that experience, and kind of like, wow, this person has a totally different life, but it's not that different when it comes to addiction. And it's kind of the great equalizer is, our drug of choice. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an external substance per se. I mean, gambling, sex and love, whatever, shopping, eating, we're all looking for that chemical reaction in our brain and in our body. And he was no different. Second time was funner, though, I do have to say, because he actually opened up about the HIV diagnosis. We did talk Tiger Blood, that whole thing with him. And even though he didn't drop his name, we knew the baseball player that he was referencing, where he got Tiger Blood, and everything else, which it's out there in the news, as Brian Wilson, who pitched for the Giants at the time.
Wow.
But then the second time, he was just more jovial and joking with us beforehand. He's like, oh, good to see you again, man. Fuck, could you imagine if we met in our using days? I'm like, yeah, we would disappear for a week. He's like, you're damn right. Or he's like, all right, let's go,
Yeah.
And have a conversation. And the interesting thing, when we gave him the final words on the second episode, he threw out there, it's like, what do you have to say? And he was just like, I hope in the cosm of the conversations we had that there's maybe just a little something that helps somebody. So you could see a humbleness to him as well. Like cool. He was like, understood. I seem to make people happiest when I'm doing something that entertains them. And he's like, and hopefully I get that chance to do it again, because it makes me feel good about me. And so it was really interesting to hear like a humbleness. He wasn't asking for the #1 show, or he's just like, I miss the acting process. I miss getting out there. I miss being a part of stuff, which I think he is working on some things now. So it was pretty cool.
Really cool. So awesome. Yeah. Talk about some of your guests. I want to talk about you. You're my guest now, but I definitely wanted to get through, like, there's a lot to talk about with your show. You have another one in behind you there. Don't Hide the Scars. We can get into that a little bit later. But before we do, tell me a little bit more about Jason. What it was like for you with your origins. You mentioned that, as you alluded to with, you're talking about Charlie Sheen and all that, there's different addictions for different people. Yours wasn't as common as some of the things that are being addressed on the show. So I really want to hear what your story was, growing up, and what got you into what you're doing today.
So boy, how do I nutshell it without taking up 2 hours? My simplest way is I come from a lineage of addiction, substance abuse on both sides of my family. I've got 2 uncles that aren't here anymore because of the disease of addiction. One took his own life and the other accidentally took his life. He was drinking while taking Oxycontin, passed out, was also smoking at the time, place went up in fire. And the other one, it's just the reality was couldn't escape it and felt the solution was to take his own life. I won't go into the graphics of it, but it was pretty horrible. He had to be identified by dental records. Let's just put it that way. So, so it was there, and when I finally started to accept that I had an issue, I actually started hitting AA. I was still married to my kid's mom, but it wasn't an environment to get sober in. We you know that we can't get sober in the same environment that makes us sick. So um for me, really though, looking back, my childhood, my first exposure was about 6, maybe 7 years old to pornography. My dad, who is an admitted sex addict, dual diagnosed addict of sex and love, as well as an NA guy and stuff, Betty Ford a couple of times and things like that. But we were able to, once he really got sober, start to trace that in our family lineage. When my grandfather died, my dad's dad, we were cleaning out his place and found pornography of a man who was 70 years old, still had this. Going back even farther, finding out that my great grandfather was a pretty unfaithful guy. My grandpa was an unfaithful guy. My dad was unfaithful when he was using substances. So it was something that was kind of prevalent. And I wasn't a cheater guy. That wasn't my thing. But I sure as heck, when a relationship was coming to the end, filled the next role pretty quick. So I had to really confront that sex and love addiction, which people usually hear the sex first and think that, which, yes, it's a byproduct of it, but I was very much always looking for affirmation from the prettiest woman that I could find. And once the butterflies went away for either both of us or myself or whatever it was, it tended to be the end of it. And pornography hung out throughout it. I did do some counseling at different times, but it would come back. And the more I would find I was turning to that, the more desire then I had to go and drink, feeling that shame, that guilt, and stuff that was still there as a kid. Because in addition to that, I was molested around 7, 8 years old. So there's these things that, you carry through, a shame and guilt that we have to do the work to let go of and accept that, when we're a kid, it was, somebody was hopefully should have protected us. Those things should never happen. Those are the never should happens. I mean, it's disgusting. And I'm sure the guy that this occurred with, because it was a male, that took a lot on me too, as far as, well, without realizing it subconsciously, I'm going to prove my manhood, see how much I like women. Yeah. And it just left me empty. And then what was the thing when you're empty? I know most alcoholics, it's like, I wanted to go numb. No, for me, I was the guy that could party and have a good time once I had a drink. I was pretty numb otherwise. So for me, it was to be able to express myself and get creative. And, and when I wasn't, I was a pretty flatline dude, so to speak. There was it's kind of a zombie, very monotone, very, just kind of, hi, how's it going? Oh, good to see you. There wasn't joy. It was a complete absence of joy. So, it just created this cycle, this loop of guilt and shame that I just thought was completely normal. That's the way you conduct yourself. That's the example that I had and, a lineage of. And so for me, it was really being a dad that I wanted to break these cycles. I didn't want my son and daughter affected in the same way that I was. Unfortunately, I can't say they never saw me drunk. They were little. We've talked about it. They both say they don't recollect. But I'm like, hey, these things ever pop up, we're here to talk through it, because I don't want you down this path. Trust me, it's not a good one.
Yeah, man, there's a lot in there. Thanks for being obviously so, transparent about it and being forthcoming. It's there's a lot on there. The first thing that comes to mind is like, this affirmation. It's an addiction to love. You say sex and love, and it's this affirmation, right? This feeling, an external, stimulus outside of yourself that you're getting hung. So very relatable to anybody that has any type of addiction. So, what does that mean? We were kind of talking about, ego at the very beginning of our interview here. So what is your relationship with ego now, and how has that, like the affirmation addiction, is that still an energy in your body? How do you navigate your ego and your affirmation addiction. And certainly I must say, like, the way that you conduct yourself now, you're very expressive and animated. So we'll get to that second. But
Sure.
first off, what is your relationship with your ego and that whole, affirmation addiction, if you will?
I think I try to keep it in perspective, like the wonderful things you said to me. And I just take that as another man trying to do good with who and what he is. So it's really keeping it in context for me. And if somebody's like, oh, you're a superstar or whatever, it's like you kind of start to choose what you are and aren't going to validate by if it's healthy language. If it's I'm proud of you, way to do something with yourself, or bring value to other people's lives, or whatever it is. Okay, I can accept that. I'll take that. That works for me. But if it's you look at what kind of language I'm talking about, it immediately my bullshit radar goes off, and like, what do you want from me?
I got you.
Immediately, because it reminds me of when I was boundaryless. There, I got it out. Because that's exactly what I would look for. Someone to overinflate. And
gotcha.
It just, to me, it's just the siren goes off if it's anything other than, hey, thanks for doing that. I got some value. Appreciate your help. Whatever it is, I've kind of been working with the buddy, I guess you could say. I'm quasi his sponsor, and just like, hey man, thanks for being there for me, and wrote me this nice message. And it's like, dude, that's what we do. This isn't me doing that. This is me having the opportunity to do business for the God that I connect with for you. So I kind of leave myself out of a lot of stuff now. Like if it brings value to someone, that wasn't me. That was something channeled through me, an opportunity given to me with life. And as long as I keep that in mind, literally the edging God out, if I don't let that occur, then I'm good. It's when I start to, I did that. That's when I got to look in the mirror and go, okay, don't be full of shit, And as far as validation from, I have a beautiful woman in my life. If another woman tells me I'm handsome, great, but that you don't know me. This woman loves me and knows everything about me, the battle wounds, the scars, the bullshit and everything else, and still says I'm proud of you, I love you, or tells me I'm handsome or attractive, whatever it is. So for me, it's kind of like, okay, context again. That's nice. You just met me. I appreciate it, but it doesn't really have a place that sits within inside me of enrichment. I just kind of keep it in context of what it is. Is it the work? Okay. Is it external things? Well, that's not a solution, and so I hope that kind of answered the question.
It does. It's a great answer. I love that. Context is king when you're talking about. And I was going to mention the edging God out. If it's like the other polarity of that's what's charging it, that's what you're feeling, that's the charge in your body, then you're on the right track. So, but you said it yourself. So just to kind of summarize, great answer, man.
Because really, if you think about it, like us with our alcohol, we were looking for an outside solution to an inside problem. 100%. So, if I'm not feeling good about myself, and that person that compliments us, or we're always searching, as in my case, for that person to compliment and validate me, they can take it away just that easy. So it's all about doing that internal work, And so it's like, it feels good when somebody says it's a value, but otherwise, whatever.
Sure. And I like what you're saying. It's like, you don't get into the hype or believing that it's like, I did that. You take that out. It's like you're acting on behalf of, you're in alignment with, whatever you believe, God, the universe, and that act is coming through you. You're in co-creation with that, as opposed to, that was me, right? And it's such a different perspective. And again, the context of it, right? So no, that was awesome, man. I really enjoyed that answer. A couple of things that came up for me when you were saying your story there too, that I'm curious about. Digging a little bit deeper too, like just from hearing your take on external validation and the way you've reframed it and conceptualize that. How about when you're talking about, getting out of that sort of monotone expression and getting comfortable with yourself without the use of substances? Was that something that was like, practiced? Like, what was the process like that for you? Was it gradual? Are you still working on it? What does that look like for you, man?
Oh, it sucked, man. It sucked. And yes, I still have to work on it daily.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I do. I'm like, it's nice this, we've now talked for a couple hours, and
Right.
exchange messages, so it's a lot different. I know there's individuals that are going to listen to this, but I'm having a conversation with my new buddy, that I made, that if I'm up in Canada, I know I can, hey, but where's the
Yeah.
meeting at, and we're going to go.
Hell yeah.
So it's a little bit different, because I do worry about if I'm over the top or something like that, I don't like to control an environment unless that's my job to at the time. Kind of like we talked before, I do some event hosting, combat sport, ring announcing, stuff like that. Like, okay, that's my job at that time to be the loud, the bit, get whatever guy, get it going. So it kind of goes back to that checking it, like what are the circumstances, where I'm at now, the, parents and addicts in need, the office here, it's our team. We're all pretty open and honest. So different environment, but you catch me walking through Target, I'm going to be a pretty stoic guy, not standoffish, but pretty stoic. And, excuse me, can I'm sorry, I need to reach there, So I think it's just now being aware of the situations, and on one hand, be empathetic, not want it to make anyone publicly feel uncomfortable, but at the same time, not make myself uncomfortable at the expense of anyone else either.
Right.
But yeah, it's been a struggle. It's still hard to come out of the monotone. It's still hard to go. It's
It's still there.
okay.
Yeah.
Wave the hands. You're Portuguese. Talk
Yeah.
big. You're French. Have a little.
Right.
Both of my parents are characters.
Right.
So let it fly a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm still developing personality. I'm just over 18 months after my last relapse, which fortunately was very short-lived. It was literally third beer in, one night. But before that, I had just over 2 years. So it's, I've got a lot of days if you combine them all and take out the whatever, as far as the new birthday or sober birthday, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But I'm still pretty new to it and getting comfortable with myself. And it's just a process. I think it is throughout all of life.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. And, it's again, when we're talking, the power of words and the way that you reframe things, context, that sort of thing. I think that factors a lot into it too, right? So if you're thinking initially that it's like it's a challenge, or it's if you're coming from a place of fear with developing these traits of yourself, or like you mentioned, there is a bit of self-doubt that comes up, versus if you can just turn that down and go, listen, this is just me, I love myself, right? And practice that, right? And that's like the yin and the yang. And I get you, man. I'm totally the same way. And when you say that you're out in public doing that, especially when I think of myself in a grocery store, funny enough, I worked at a grocery store, but that was like me again, when you're saying about the ring, when you're doing like the ring side, it's again, context, right? So when I'm in there, my personality gets turned up to 10 when I was working. But on the flip side, if I was in there just at another grocery store, just my own personality, I would be very much like you. And that was the way I was raised, just like stoic, not confrontational, but just keeping to myself, not trying to, get in anybody's way or inconvenience anybody. So I totally get that, man. Yeah, for sure. That resonates big time. What other things have you had a chance to do to find, a release for what used to be there to give you that release, or that sense of like gratification? What sort of things have you found in your life, or are currently practicing, that you found that help you with that kind of thing?
Community's big for me. That's a huge component for me. I don't know where you got with your alcoholism, but I definitely was at that isolation point. Because I just, I was ashamed of who I was. I didn't want to connect with anyone, and I wanted to hide it. But now for me, really, if I can't do it in person, as simple as, I've developed text buddies of all different kinds, some quote celebrities, all the way down to the guy that's on day 3, right? No, as of this conference, 4. sitting there,
That's
talking
cool.
with them. So for me, if I just feel that I'm helping others see they have value, and vice versa, I feel good about myself. That like, okay, this day was worth it. Sure, maybe
Yeah.
something sucked.
Yeah.
It's like there are no bad days anymore. There's
Yeah.
bad things that happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
going to be bad things that happen, goodness forbid. We have so
Yeah.
many things that outside of our control.
Yeah.
I think that serenity prayer is big for anyone in life. I don't care if you struggle with substance abuse or not, whatever it is, focus on what you can, control what you can't, and have the wisdom to know the difference. So I think as long as I kind of keep those things in check, keep open communication within my home, the most important people in my life, and I lost sight of this, are those that are within my wall, my children, my girlfriend, and myself. Those are
Mm.
that's my direct tribe to take care of, nurture, and be nurtured by. But I definitely, I wake up, try to get up early. I still struggle with some depression, anxiety still's there. I'm trying to do more work actually from our conversation. If you remember, that's why I dug in, what's the meditation process for you? And,
Yeah.
I'm really trying. That is an area I want to get much better at, for sure. I have that go, 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 go mind, and then I crash. And even one of my guy that's become was an indirect mentor, became one. People will see him. He's pretty big on social media. His name Higgy, that people know him by. And he's just like, dude, got to avoid that crash. So learning to moderate in general, take some time
Yeah.
out, say it's okay, this thing can wait till later, you need to put attention to this or that or whatever it is. So it's a juggling act, and it probably will always will be. It's part of the mastery of self.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that we even talked about when you were on Knockin Doorz Down, that was really insightful, the people that you work with, about how you had them write out and own their own feelings and thoughts.
Yeah.
And so for me,
That's
that's
huge.
important too, that, I had said to my girlfriend, I'm like, I've got to start writing more. She's like, oh, are you going to write it your book, or what are you going to, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no, just to myself.
Yeah.
She's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. If you remember, I did get you a journal like a year ago,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. And so it's these practices that people like yourself, and so many others that I've had on, some great guests. Like I said, Adam Javelin. I'd reach out to Mike Diamond. That's a guy that you should really get on here. Just a phenomenal individual, but they become indirect mentors. So the things that they
Cool.
share, I've just started cherry picking it and writing it
Yeah.
down, that I need to try this,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think in recovery, there's some good guides. I'm a meeting guy. I think 12 steps is great. I think everyone would benefit from a 12-step program, but maybe that doesn't work for everyone. And even within that context of the 12 steps, there's a lot of different ancillary things that are really beautiful. So it's kind of test it out, like see what works for you. As long as you're not using, see what works for you.
Right.
What's
Yeah.
worst going to happen? Because I can't get any more drunk. Like
Right.
like how many more orgasms with someone I hardly know would whatever. It's all these outside things that do not feel good inside. So it's like those don't even become to the top of my mind anymore. It's not even an option. I've literally had moments of being restored to sanity, as they say, that it's like, okay, I'm on the path. This is starting to work. Let's try something a little different. Let's tweak this a little different. Maybe it's the language that I use in a meeting.
Yep.
Maybe even hearing a guy that, I've had meetings where there's somebody just pouring their heart out, and you just let them know, hey, you're there for them, and this is going to get easier. It is going to change you. So all that stuff is so valuable to all of us in life, no matter what.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know what? I'm very curious as we're going along here. I want to, if you can, what was the experience like? Because you mentioned, yeah, there is some parallels to you and myself with the isolation. I was definitely drinking in secret, and in isolation. And as far as you saying, the community thing was really what helped you do that spiritual 180 and then figure out purpose in your life and so forth. What was it like? What was life like right in that spot where right before the shift? And I'm curious, what was your first experience about going to a meeting? Was like, did you go with somebody? Just the whole context, that whole story of
Yeah.
what was like that like, and was that an immediate shift? Just that whole like that whole like pivotal moment, if you will, if you can unpack
Sure.
it.
So my first like meetings, like I said, were years ago, and everyone there was great, but it was still a vibe of people talking about how spiritual they were, but nothing's changed in their life. And some
Okay.
people almost looking for a solution to still drink. So I think that's why I went about 5 times. And I think that's why I just didn't connect with anyone. I didn't feel like people were being totally vulnerable. And sometimes when I would throw stuff, and who knows, in retrospect, maybe they're going, this kid's full of shit, because I was still in the back of my mind, I'll do this for a while, I'll be cured and I can go drink. But once I really started to work the process, um, that was really, different. I started getting a sense of community, a better sense of self. And as much as we don't like a relapse, mine was necessary, because when I did, and I got the chills thinking about it. Sorry if I get a little emotional.
Yeah,
I
let me
don't
know.
remember driving to the store and buying the beer. I know I came, and I was sober. I came to as I'm about halfway through the third one, and I contacted 2 people, one who's now my sponsor, and the other one who's another brilliant guy by the name of Tony Hoffman. Look him up, everybody. He's just wonderful. And my sponsor and Tony were there for me. And this was 1 o'clock in the morning, and these are both very busy people. But they were there. And shortly thereafter, working with my sponsor, who is very rigorous about the steps, and we hit him quick. He's like, yeah, you've touched on these before, but we're going to hit him. We're going to hit him quick. He's like, I'm not giving you an option. You're doing it. What is good for someone like me? He just nailed me. And through that process is when I really had my first spiritual experience. And it was like, whoa, okay, wow, I am worthy of love. Sorry, I'm getting a little teared up here.
Yeah, no, let it happen.
And once I had that, it was like, everything's gonna be okay. Shit's gonna happen, but it helped me develop more and more. There's gonna be bad things that happen in days, but there's really no bad days. You got another one, and you got another one sober. That's the best I can put it in a nutshell. Sorry.
Yeah, dude. No, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. It's such an important part of the story, like in my opinion. Like to
Yeah.
and for folks that are maybe sober curious that are listening and a little bit nervous about, or there is a lot of people that are somewhat questioning whether spirituality, what that even means to them. And I've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it in those rooms where people are just like, they can mentally you construct everything else, but that spiritual side of it is just so effing challenging for people,
Yeah.
right? And so it's just for you to even mention that as well is super important in my opinion. So thank you for being so vulnerable for that.
Yes, sir.
There's 2 other things I want to kind of keep in your story here before, and then I want to get on to this gentleman, Carlos Vieira. Did I say it right?
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
Yep.
get into him. But before we do, 2 things that really came up that I think are going to be interesting topics I want to pick your brain a little bit about. First off, you mentioned the relapse a couple times. What is, yeah, and you mentioned how important it is, but let's get that one on the table a little
Sure.
bit more, like, investigate, if you will, because I this is a big one for a lot of people, and myself included. My own experience with it, I tended to do like it's called the second arrow, where it'd be like I'd have it's like the idea of like you get in a car accident and then you get upset at yourself for getting in the car accident. So
All
that's
right.
what I would do. I'd have a relapse. And I'd be like, you idiot! How could you do this? Which really just amplifies the situation, and then the
Uh-huh.
guilt, shame spiral, and all that. What was it like for you? I know that you just mentioned you called these folks, but just in a general, what was your like process for being able to metabolize and move on from a relapse? What did that look like for you?
Again, it wasn't immediate that it
Mm,
felt good, or that I saw that it was necessary. But like I said, once that spiritual component started to really get a bright light, and that bright light shined upon me the inherent thing about me that is completely full of shit and being a people pleaser. And we
Mm,
think that people pleasing is for other people. No, it's selfish. It's so
yeah.
that I can manipulate, or could manipulate, navigate, whatever it was, whoever, whatever, however, to just simply have it be whatever scenario. If it was a woman, might have been overspending money, whatever their thing was, their love language, figuring it out, saying, I can fulfill that. And not realizing I was doing it. You know, these are things that I thought you did, or with your out with certain buddies, you talk a certain way.
Yeah.
You might go ahead and compromise your own morals and ethics, you know, and using your whatever language, or, you know, I'm not someone that ever, oddly, for being exposed to pornography, would sit oogle over women or talk to them about them derogatory. You know, I know those things occurred when I started getting inebriated. So it was realizing that I had to start setting boundaries, not only with everybody else, but with myself. And once
Mm,
that started, I started to be able to go, who am I? What are my values? And how am I going to stick to those core values no matter what?
mm. It's fantastic. You know, there's a synchronicity. I just heard this. I was actually in a virtual room about a week ago, and somebody had mentioned that as far as like being a caregiver or being a people pleaser is actually basically essentially being a puppet master. I was like,
Yep.
whew, I have never heard somebody say that before. And then when you were talking about people pleasing being, you know, inauthentic in a sense, I forget exactly how you worded it, but man, I was getting chills. Like I literally got some chills from you saying that. So, you know, and that's so important. Like what were your origins of, you know, being a people pleaser? Was that you as a kid? Was that Jason as a young Jason, like with your parents and just being able to a question for you.
Absolutely.
Was it okay? And then how about a second question? When you were in like school, high school, was there like a degree? Did you ever have a sense of bullying or that you didn't belong in groups, so you would need to people please, or you know, essentially do that kind of that chameleon thing, talk differently with certain groups to fit in? Was that the
Yep.
origins of that? Okay.
Yeah, most certainly a child felt seen, not heard. And and really digging into that, I think it was more with my dad than with my
Mm,
mom. My mom was really probably even overcompensated a lot for my dad, and I think I kind of almost was an overcompensation for her with how my dad. I was her buddy that went to sporting events, and
yeah.
you know, all these things. High school for me, you know, I did have more bullying more in my grade school days. Kind of when I got to high school, I guess I kind of found a high school rhythm. I wouldn't say I was popular, but I wasn't unpopular.
Mm,
And you know, when I was going, it was the early 90s, so like 92 to 96. So I was a really odd dude in that I dressed kind of with the hip hop style that was going on, you know,
yeah.
the bright colors. And I literally, if you took Will
Rat.
Smith's wardrobe from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, threw it on a skinny white kid in Central
Yeah.
California, that was me. But at the
It's
same
amazing.
time, I was kind of a trippy dude in that you know, people like, what the hell are you listening to? Oh, this is Prince. And like,
Yeah.
you mean that weird guy? And then all of a sudden here's people liking Prince. And
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, I had a friend, she was going for cosmetology, so I'd show up with painted nails, and they're like,
Yeah.
you know, and you'd figure out every word that you would be told by every football player or whatever. And then all of a sudden they see that you're hanging out with four of the really good looking women, and all of a sudden the football player shows up with painted nails, you know? And so it
Yeah.
was kind of just, I guess in a weird way, I was my kind of myself, but yet I still play that chameleon. I could bounce from
Yeah.
group to group to group. I could go
Yeah.
from the sports people to the theater people to the dance people to the music people to the intellectual people. You know, I didn't really sit anywhere. I think the only authenticity I ever gave was to my two best friends that are still my two best friends to this day. And
Super cool.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
kind of the thing, you know, and my view of myself, like talking back at my high school reunion, you know, some girls like, man, do you remember I had a crush on you? No, you didn't. I'm like, yeah, I did. And they're like, well, you didn't make it clear because I had a crush, you know, or
Oh
whatever
yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, really?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, because
Yeah.
I was already pretty self-deprecating at that point, you
Sure.
know. So
Sure.
didn't have a lot of girlfriends or anything like that. Didn't date much. I think my senior year, really, that was it,
Yeah.
that I can recall. So But
Yeah,
I was just,
interesting.
that guy that was a chameleon
Yeah.
and didn't even start substances as much as maybe I went to a party. I was the guy that got people home. It
Yep.
wasn't even on my radar until my early 20s.
Yeah, interesting, eh? Some kind. I'm just hearing your story. I'm imagining, when you're getting into your early 20s like that. Uh, yeah, that's when these patterns continue to carry over, right? And it's one thing to have those patterns when you're in a youngster and all that, but it gets so much more challenging when you're into adulthood. So
Yeah.
you were talking about earlier, two things that put up flags for me were, you said the core values and boundaries. So no,
Hmm.
that's been so important for myself and anybody that is going through sobriety recovery. What would you say that are your not so much boundaries, that can be a little more nuanced, but I'm curious, like, what are your core values that you really, you're filtering your life through, your decisions through? And second question for that, how long did that take to get to that stage? Because I know for me, when I was doing it, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be easy, and then I started really picking the words that I had. I'm like, I think those are my parents' values, right? Or like,
All right.
or it's like the value that I think society wants from me, and I'm like, I don't resonate with
Yes.
any of these. And that was like when
Yes.
I turned 40. I'm like, what the hell? I got so confused with this. So how was it for you? What are your words, and how did you come about finding them?
I think, it's still a process, because I think we get confronted with new situations that we
Yeah,
hadn't before. So
yeah,
we
fair.
have to examine it. But for me, it's like the big book says rigorous honesty.
Mm,
And that's more so, I think, as long as we can do that with ourselves, we can do it with others. But you can have couth. You know what I'm saying? You can kind of go, you don't go somebody, hey, how you doing? You might go, I'm a little down when that terrible inner monologues, like, you're a terrible piece of shit. Remember all those
yeah.
terrible things that you did, and then you get that party that goes, that does not define me. That is not what makes me up. So I think it's correcting that course, but I had to ask myself, what do I really want to not only offer the world, but hopefully get back in return?
Mm,
And I wanted to be an honest man. I wanted to be someone that uh, having a significant other, that they would feel good, and a sense of security in this, in knowing that we could have open dialogue. And we do. We talk about very difficult things. My kids, I'm not one of those parents, my kids tell me everything. Bullshit. No, nobody's kids tell them
yeah.
everything. Look at you and I, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I want them to know that that door is open. So when I really started to focus on those things, it started to help with everybody else. The conversations have changed with my dad, which we didn't have a great relationship until about my mid 20s. And now we're very close. My mom, there's an honesty, but I also know what her boundaries are. So there's places I don't go. Whereas before, I would just shout things out and be like, Jason, really? Like, what's wrong with, So now that it's just having that couth and understanding of other people's things, and boundaries. So for me, it was, how do I carry myself where people feel respected, but they get
Mm,
authenticity at the same time? Like, I can tell someone you've crossed a boundary without being a dickhead about it.
totally, totally.
Um, but I still sit there and go through it, Matt. I still do. It's still going to be a checklist all the time. I think, we're in a politically charged time. We're in an emotionally charged time. And every now and then I can be very pragmatic, which can be a little bit cold. And so I have to
Mm,
kind of go, okay, there's a way to share your values and approach without feeling that you're impeding or not hearing somebody else out. So
mm,
yeah, it's yeah, I know it's going to be a process just for the
yeah,
rest of my life. And there's
yeah,
going to be times where it's like, okay, is an amend needed? Okay. Is it a verbal amend, or is it a living amend? And just really do that.
yeah. No, I love that. That's great. That's great. Before we go any further, I'm just curious because I know you're a busy guy. We're gonna start going over here. Honestly really digging the conversation. Do we have a bit of
Likewise.
time before I go any further, or we're gonna have to start wrapping up here?
You're good.
Yeah, you're good. Okay, perfect, awesome. Yeah, that's great. And I'm gonna come back with the authenticity thing. That's usually my last question. So we'll come back
Okay.
to that word. I love that word. The ancestral thing. And I believe we touched a little bit on this in when I was on your show. Yeah, just the idea of it's a topic that's come up in the last few years. It's a little more familiar or popularized, like ancestral healing, and just being
Hmm.
aware of your family stories, and not necessarily like as
Yeah.
a it's just like as an understanding thing, understanding yourself. And I believe, and I'm not sure how it is with you, like spiritually, that if there's some like karma or some things to be paid off, or like patterns to be broken, however you want to verbalize it, there is something there that it's like if you can break a pattern that has been passed down from generation to generation, especially on both sides, like, and it meets at you and you put an end to that,
Yeah.
that's pretty powerful, man. So
Yeah.
what is your take on that? Have you done any any like reading or podcast, listening to podcasts, anything about this, the ancestral healing? Do you believe in
Absolutely.
it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk
Absolutely.
about it. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I mean, in addition to some guests that have been on, kind of like yourself, I wanted to pick your brain. So I've had some great people on. I've really started to dig into like Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's
Yeah.
great because I was more curious in like Dr. Rob Kelly, who's become a direct mentor, somebody I can get a hold of now and ask questions. I want to understand not only on a psychological level, but uh, you know, a overall being of the existence of a human and how it's put up. And Joe Dispenza will talk a lot about, on a molecular level, easy for me to say,
Yeah.
because we're all energy,
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so for me, once I kind of really started to break down, wow, that energy was transferred through. And it really is. I mean, we're
Yeah.
made up of molecules, and I believe that stuff does get passed down if you really think about what we are as just a collection of cells. And so once I really started to look at that as like, okay, I can be the conduit to divert this energy. And for me, that just makes sense. Like science stuff makes sense. When I'm working with my hands, one of my obsessions that my first sponsor got me back into is like, what did you love as a kid? GI Joe, military stuff, Legos, perfect, great. I'm
Yeah.
sending you a gift card. So when I could kind of do that and take little pieces and form this thing and follow some instructions and maybe even go, you know what? I kind of want to put this over here a little bit. And I will on some of these builds, like, make this Star Wars ship look a little bit different. And I want to
Yeah.
put a
Yeah.
piece in there that looks like it was a gun blast or something,
Yeah.
whatever. So for me, it was really taking a look at that diverting of energy. And then another great person and if you can get them, send them my way, because I've been trying Gary John Bishop, his most known book, Unfuck Yourself.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's just a wonderful pragmatic way of looking at things. And I like his approach of kind of calling you out for your bullshit. He'd probably have a lot more following if he sugar coated stuff, but he doesn't. I'm one of those people that if I know you're open to it, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. It's just not in me to do so. That's being my authentic self. If you're someone that needs it a little bit softer, I got to parent my son different than my daughter. They're just
Sure.
different.
Yeah.
And I don't have a manual for it. So hopefully I'm doing a good job. They seem to be wonderful people thus far.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, those kind of things for me are incredibly helpful. I dig it. And as someone that just was enthusiastic about broadcasting, podcasting, it's probably my other obsession, audiobooks and
Cool.
podcasts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I could see that. I can see
yeah.
that in you. Yeah. That's super cool. I bet you one day we'll have to compare. Like, do you use Audible for audiobooks?
Yes, I do.
Okay, we'll have to do like screenshots of our library, like, and just kind of see how many books we have that are like, I'd be pretty shocked if we don't have a lot of overlap in our books
I'm
by the
sure.
sounds of it. So super cool. How old are your kids, by the way?
Daughter is son's about to be 14 as of this
Cool.
recording
No way.
in, let's see what day,
It's right
4 days.
No way.
And then daughter will be 13 at the end of September.
Right on. So you're getting
Yeah.
into that age, they're gonna start giving you some back sass, eh? The teenagers. Well, that's
Dude, it's already here,
it's
man.
already.
It's already
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And it's not as bad as some other parents
Yeah.
have that I communicate with, but my son is on the autism spectrum, so
Okay.
Asperger's.
Yeah.
So him sometimes getting, the normal communication, it's not there. Like, you know, Dad, why'd you say, ask the lady that checked us out at the grocery store how she's doing? Because it's a polite thing to do. Well, do you actually care? Yes, I do. Because that's Maria, and she's known you since you were a little kid. We've been coming, you know, or so him kind of very bright. I mean, the kid just anything about history, you just ask, and all of a sudden, what the, you know, that's But when it comes to social cues, not so much there, you know.
Sure, I got you. Yeah.
Whereas my daughter, this beautiful artistic, I mean, draws, paints, amazing digital art, music. She's playing, I think, her fourth instrument now, violin. Has an ear. I mean, we'll listen to classical music in the car, and she'll get home and, are you playing part of that piano piece? Yeah, I'm kind of figuring it out. And she's not playing it back somewhere. She's just kind of
got it up
it's
there.
like it's like, wow, mind blowing.
Yeah, like the perfect pitch or whatever it is, just has that memory for it. That's crazy, man.
Yeah, super and so it's that cool vicarious through them stuff that, you know, it's like, wow, I wish I had that skill, you know. So
not a musician yourself?
I'm a terrible one. I do. I can play a little bit of drums, some guitar. I can kind of, you know, I can strum out some chords, some 80s guitar riffs.
Do a little, something around the campfire there if you need to.
Yeah. Some bass line. Yeah, I can break out a little Poison. Every rose has its thorn for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The Motley Crue stuff like that.
Of course. Yeah, I mentioned the Motley
Crue.
Yeah, all the classics, right? That's great. Yeah. You know, we're talking about kids. Like, I want to, you know, and we even talked about just subject to the ancestral healing. How has it been like for your inner child? Like, if you want to get into this subject, if not, we can move on. But like, how has it been for reparenting your inner child? Is that something that you view as something that you're doing? Is that something you're kind of like, not so much for me? Curious about it.
Here's a funny but true story. So I think we're kind of close. I think I'm about 6-7 years older than you. So we're in that Jean-Claude Van Damme era.
Hell
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he had a show that unfortunately Amazon didn't renew for a second season. It's called Jean-Claude Van Johnson. And so it loosely plays off of him as an action star, but it's his cover for being an espionage agent.
That's amazing.
So it digs into his childhood, which was a very abusive one. So it did play off his childhood, which is true. You know, even in it, I think even in the show, if I recollect, because I want to say he's bipolar. I can't remember. He openly speaks about it, as well as his substance abuse. I mean, you know, cocaine was his thing.
Sure.
So it's kind of interesting. These guys, again, hero as a kid, much like a Nikki Sixx of Motley Crue or somebody like that, you know, and then you know, towards sobriety and really focusing on this stuff. But the final episode, sorry, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
While he's trying to reconcile why wasn't I an orphan, his character and all this stuff, he has this vision of him talking to his child self, and the kid like self waves him over. He's bawling and he goes, "I love you." And it was like, yeah, what threw me in tears. So it was really kind of that when people said, you know, connecting with your inner child, and going back and being like, okay, these things happen to you. They aren't you. They don't define you. Love yourself. Love that kid. Love everything you've been through. And not only that, have gratitude for everything you've been through. Right. Because look at the stuff that is starting to occur. Like, I'm meeting so many amazing people like yourself. I wouldn't think, oh, I've developed a new buddy up in Canada. I think another guy, maybe you know up there, Ryan Phillips.
For the name.
He was the he was like the George Jung of pot for but he was Canadian. Great freaking guy.
Wicked.
I think Adam that you've had on your podcast, you know, a few
Adam
episodes.
Carroll?
Adam Carroll, thank you. Kind of started to talk with him. He's actually, we recorded an episode with him for Don't Hide the Scars, and then eventually will for Knockin Doorz Down. So just so many amazing people that now it's like, whoa, you always really wanted connectivity, but now that you've connected with yourself and protected yourself, you actually can. And guess what? It's people that will share similar values, or can throw out a new value that you never thought of, or actually, you know, wow, you were faced with that. How did you handle that? You know, so it's it's like life has gotten really cool. That thing I feared the middle age, when I was younger, and I'll never be old. I'll be partying and
Yeah.
dating, young chicks in the next concerts. Like,
Yeah.
no, like the
No.
priorities have
Yeah.
shifted,
Big time.
but still loving that little kid. Cause guess what? I still build Legos. And so I think
Yeah.
that little kid still smiles
Yeah.
because now there's some cool Star Wars and race car Legos that never
Yeah.
existed when I was a kid. So he's pretty happy
He's
with
pretty
life.
happy about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, amazing. That's so cool. I love, you know what, there was it's like the permission, all the permission I needed as far as like still being able to have like action figures and such was, so Carl Jung, was
Yeah.
well known. He got to a certain stage. I want to say he was like pretty deep into his career, like between 40 and 50, somewhere in that area. And he was so like fulfilled on one side from his career and such, but there was still a component of him that was missing. And he was like, what is it? So he went back and he thought of what he liked to do as a child. And when he was 5 or 7 or whatever it was playing with the little army men, right? And coloring. So he started doing that. He would actually set up these like epic like day-long wars with the army man and just keep picture like
awesome.
Carl Jung doing like that with all the sound effects.
I love
Like
it.
if
That's
he
so
does
awesome.
it, dude, I can do the two,
Right?
right? The Legos or the whatever action figures. Like I used to
Yeah.
have like the Batman plot lines going into Christmas. And,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Have the bat, it's the whole thing. It's the whole thing, right? So, dude, it's so amazing. And yeah, Adam Carroll is such a effing wicked guy, man.
Yeah.
I've known him a couple months now. I had him on my show, and we're like pretty good friend, like really good friends now. So we're
Yeah.
like texting every day, and so you're gonna love having him on there. So yeah, don't hide the scars. Let's do a little bookend on your podcasting.
Sure.
We started with it. Let's go into this. So don't hide the scars. You got the Motley Crue podcast. Let's talk about don't hide the scars though.
Sure.
What is going on with that one?
So I'm part of, I would be the media and social media director here at Parents and Addicts in Need Pain, a nonprofit in Fresno, California. The founder, amazing guy, really. Once we're done, you got to meet Flint. It was one of those people too that chance meeting, just a brilliant, beautiful person, very, again, a straightforward guy. So it really worked for me. And we developed a friendship, and, he became a mentor. So got the opportunity here, and he just went, hey, can you help the podcast and our social media with a lot of the things that you're doing is, not only awareness within our community, but bring value to people. And so it's just been an amazing opportunity, and it's pretty neat to have a partner like Flint on the podcast when we speak with people. And I'm gonna reach out. You're coming on,
Please do,
because I can kind of set it up, and then his
Yeah.
wisdom can throw at someone else's. And I can literally, there's times I just sit back for about a half an hour and just take it in.
Sure. Sounds amazing.
So it's a beautiful experience, and the stuff that we're being able to do here in the community. I mean, fentanyl is hitting us really hard in this part of California, in the Central Valley. It's coming up from Mexico. We know that. We speak with the DA here. We recently had a gentleman on it as part of the Fort Division fentanyl overdose resolution team, part of the police department here, as well as the DA of Fresno County,
Wow.
Lisa Smitkamp. And they threw the real knowledge. So it's kind of a different approach than with Knockin Doorz Down.
Totally.
We'll really have these like actual, what is going on in the community? What is the real education? What can we really warn people about? How can we really provide these tools to help not only the parent, but hopefully a youth stumbles upon it and goes, yeah, man, God, hear this story about how this person that had a good life went this way. And, so it's part of our mission to continue to educate and get that out there and give firsthand help to people that say, I need help. Cool. We'll connect you. We'll get it working for you.
Right on. So just providing a lot of resources, as opposed to with the Knockin Doorz Down, where there's a lot of stories, right? There's such a power of hearing your story and somebody else's, right? You're talking about community, and there's just something that really connects you and gives you permission to release some of this shame and guilt when you hear somebody has that same story, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess it's like I'm not the only one. It just relieves you that pressure, right? That shame, right? So that's super rad. So how long is the Don't Hide the Scars? How long has that one been running for? Is that still fairly new, or have you guys been?
They've had it. They had a different gentleman that was co-hosting, and then he had moved along to a different career, so it allowed for me to be able to come in. and work here with the wonderful people at Parents and Addicts in Need. But they've had it almost as long as I think I was doing Knockin Doorz, or have been doing
Okay.
Knockin Doorz Down. So
Yeah.
it's been over a good 2 years.
Couple year run there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think it's year 2, whereas with Knockin Doorz Down, I'd be in the 3rd year.
Be in 3rd year now. Yeah, right on. And just I want to, because there is an interesting story, and we want to make sure they give a proper shout out to Carlos here. What was your how did you, because he had a book of the same name.
Yeah.
What was the whole origin story there? How did you meet him? Are you still in touch with them? Like what is his deal there? Because he is on the cover still of your the animated cover. Both of you guys are still on there, right?
It depends on what app you're on. For whatever reason, Apple hasn't re-indexed.
It is
so
Apple.
Yeah. So that's just what I had a co-host at one time, and he's no longer on Knockin Doorz Down. Just we had some changes, nothing negative.
Yeah.
Just what he wanted for life. And his name was Mikey, great guy. He had some substance abuse issues. But as far as with Carlos Vieira, so Carlos and I had been friends for quite some time. I actually met him when he got clean. He decided he was going to do something he always wanted to do as a kid, which was go stock car racing. So he did.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah. And
Super cool.
When he started doing that, so this was 15, 16 years ago that I've known him. I met him pretty quickly after that. And I have a background, my family, a lot of motorsports. Cool. So we just kind of became buddies through that. And then he started an energy drink, which he highlights in the book. And it was called 5150, which comes from the last night that he got busted because he was on a cocaine binge, and he was declared a 5150. So he wanted to kind of turn the stigma around with it, because when he did that, he started the energy drink and lifestyle clothing brand and everything else. He started a foundation, and there's different programs. One's Race to Be Drug Free. So that's helps get kids off the streets, provides free after school activities, Race for Autism. So it was kind of a thing. He was finding people that work for him and his family are sweet potato farmers.
No way.
So he was finding this was coming up more and more in our community. He was hearing about children with autism, and it had some people at work that he heard them conversing. So he started a part of the foundation with that. And then another scholarship for teens that are getting ready to graduate, go to post-secondary school, be it trade school, college, whatever, if they themselves or someone in their family, or they're doing work concerning mental health in their community. So he had all this stuff going, and then I started reaching out to him. His addiction was cocaine, and he got clean. And so, in addition to friendship, he's, become a mentor. And he's like, hey, you're always asking me to sponsor these podcasts you're doing. Like, what if you do one for me? And I'm like,
cool.
Well, I guess so. And he's like, well, I got something cooking. I'll get a hold of you in like 30 days time, and in Carlos fashion, 3 hours later, okay, so here it is. I'm writing my book. It's called Knockin Doorz Down. I want you to do a podcast. Maybe, he's like, because he kind of was pushing me to potentially write a book too. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm dyslexic. Writing's not for the mass public, not my thing. And he's like, yeah, but you can talk. And so he's like, let's do a podcast about turning adversity into advantage. That's really the premise of Knockin Doorz Down. Of course, a lot of focus with addiction, but mental health or childhood trauma, whatever it is. So it's not necessarily always addiction, but there's value that anyone can take. And so we were trying to throw all these names around. He's like, look, just call the podcast the same as my book. We had nothing else. And so, okay. So we've forever been trying to get into the lexicon. Knockin Doorz Down is about taking your adversities and turning them into your advantage. And it's been a wild ride. I never would have thought like, hey, you remember that tattoo artist you like, Kat Von D? Yeah. Well, you're going to go to her house. Wow. And then her husband, who you're a fan of his band Prayers, he's going to be there. Not only that, you're going to talk to the guy now about once a month, so it's it's just been a weird ride, Matt, and a pretty cool one for sure.
You have quite literally been knocking doors down, like just it's these otherwise perceived like limitations that you may have had before, and you're just going right for it, so right through it. So super cool. I love it. Great story. That's the cool thing about podcasting, eh? Is this actually I was on somebody's show yesterday, and he said the main thing he likes about it is this. It's kind of like improv. I've never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Depending, because like like we had a few bullet points I had that I wanted to talk to
Yep.
you about, and other than that, we've just been going for it. So it's super cool.
It
Um,
absolutely is a
yeah.
yes and.
Yes, and exactly.
Yes
Totally,
and.
man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. For sure. You know what? That pretty much covers it as far as this episode. Actually, you know what? One last thing. So we were talking
Sure.
Jean-Claude Van Damme. So I want to go back to
All
it.
right.
Have you seen that movie, the JCVD? It's his initials, and it was
Oh
kind of
yeah.
artsy,
Yep.
dude. And unfortunately, I mean, it's not going to be to any surprise of anybody listening to this. I was inebriated at the time of watching it. Because this is, this when it first came out. That was back in whatever,
Uh,
2008 or whatever. So I was
yeah.
at the height of my drinking. I remember thinking it was amazing, specifically the final scene where he levitates up into like the rafters of the final scene and has this like monologue where he's just like he drops character and he's just like he
Yep.
says some pretty profound stuff, and I'm like, wow, what an insane way to end an otherwise pretty insane movie. But like
Yeah.
that ending really stuck with me. Do you remember the scene, like the ending of that movie?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a wonderful way of breaking the fourth wall,
Hell yeah. Hell
And
yeah.
again, I think it's what really spawned that TV show on that was on
Okay.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Jean-Claude Van Johnson. It was kind of a real look into it,
Yeah.
but let's over embellish this stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm kind of sharing my story here with you. So
Right.
but
That's cool, man.
yeah,
That's really
it
interesting.
was a beautiful. You know what? I haven't thought of that since I watched it. It
Yeah.
really was kind of almost like a beautiful pull the veil down
It was.
moment of this guy that yeah, okay, I do
Yeah.
the splits and the
Yeah.
all the kicks,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it's just a person just like any
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah, I thought that was amazing. And just have one final callback to earlier is like we were talking about fourth wall breaking. Like Will Smith in Fresh Prince was the best for that, eh? Where you like look right at the camera, do like the right. Oh man, when done properly, there's almost nothing better. But
Yeah.
yeah, dude, I really enjoyed talking with you today. It's been great. And,
Likewise.
dude. This I think this will be an ongoing thing. Safe to say, it'd just be great to have pick a topic and just kind of riff on it now that we have each other's backstory and
Yep.
everything. Let's do it, man. I love it. And definitely looking forward to coming on the Don't Hide the Scars.
Yes, sir.
And I got a few names here, man. I was scribbling them down as you're telling me. Well, as soon as we get off air, I'll just make sure I got the names spelt or said them correctly. Last chance though, for you, Jason, today. Anything that you'd like to say? What was your? Oh, you know what? I almost skipped over it. Last question for you. I
All
promise.
right.
Authenticity. What does it
Yes.
mean to you? What is authenticity to you?
If I come out of a situation going, oh, I was full of shit, then I can check the authenticity. Another important element is, again, why do we say the serenity prayer? I know that I can control me, my actions, my stuff, and I have to, as a part of building my own authenticity, because trust me, I still have my moments like, God, you're kind of full of shit there, but like
Yeah.
maybe you should get a hold of them. Or I've had things where my anger has come out as opposed to really directly sharing, my emotion, owning my emotion, much like the work you do with people, like it going, I, as opposed to, well, that made me, no, this is the response I had. But also important part of authenticity is the acceptance that everyone else is being their best authentic self as well. So that building up of trust. So trust is a two-way street. So for me, that's become an important element of it. And at the end of the day, just being honest with myself and being willing to communicate questions that people are maybe asking me or tasks. And if it's not something I'm going to do, saying no. It's a statement. It's enough. And I think that's important when we become authentic. We lose that people pleasing. I'm a big one. So for me, the saying no, that's it. I can leave it at that. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, that's the easiest boundary. Well, seemingly easiest as far as it's two letters, right?
Right.
Man, can that be challenging? It's like you have to it slips out of your mouth the first few times. And you're like, it feels so strange and foreign, right?
Oh,
it was for me.
It can suck.
Right?
It
Two
can
letters,
suck.
man. But it's just like, yeah, and it's like you say, practice, man. So That's great. That's a super cool. See, mic drop moment, but your mic's pretty expensive over there. I know that one. So don't be dropping that one. But where can we find you online, and what's the easiest way to get a
Sure.
hold of you?
All right. So boy, I got like too many handles, don't I?
I'll throw them all in the show notes. So just just
Yeah.
let her rip.
For Pain, on every social media, Pain Nonprofit. And for Knockin Doorz Down, Knockin Doorz Down on Facebook and Instagram. If you are a Twitter person, I think it's under KDD Media Company. Then for myself, you just search Jason LaChance. I think Twitter or Instagram, excuse me, is Jason T LaChance. You'll find me. Hey, I'm always open to talk. You know, you're new to recovery, older recovery, and go, hey, no, man, think about it this way. Please drop some knowledge on me. I'm all about it. I'm a pretty open guy to taking in some new stuff.
Brilliant. Awesome. Any final words of wisdom? You know, I think every guest sort of puts the other guy on the spot, or every host puts the guest on the spot.
Right.
What's the final statement you'd like to say here today, Jason? No pressure.
Yours was so good. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess when it comes to certain things in life, let's pull a Mr. Miyagi. If you remember Karate Kid, where he's talking about the grape, Yoda talks about it too. There is no try, there's do or do not. It's the same kind of thing, grape on right side of the road, safe. Grape on left side of the road, safe. Grape stand in the middle,
Yeah.
And so I say for anyone, if you've been able to take a look at yourself, like Matt and I, we had to get honest. Every other addict had to get honest. I am an addict. I am powerless to this. Don't stop with that. Like fully get going. If it's substance abuse, maybe it's a mental health disorder. Maybe it's whatever it is. Maybe you want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and people are telling you no. Well, then you know what? Put in the work to do it.
Yeah.
Dig into your life 100% with passion. And that doesn't mean you're not going to have tough days. That doesn't mean that some days you're not going to meet that thing, but really go after it. In life, kind of all we have sometime is hope. And we don't know what the destination is with the journey. So enjoy that path, enjoy that digging into the process. I guarantee you're going to get more out of life than you expected.
Brilliant. We'll put a pin on in there. Thanks, brother.
You got it.